Some people go to the wilderness to find themselves. Others go to lose themselves entirely. When 5 trauma survivors and their therapist vanished from a remote Colorado campsite, they left behind evidence that their healing journey had become something far more disturbing than anyone imagined. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Rocky Mountain wilderness as Dr. Sarah Chen stepped out of her Jeep at the Pine Ridge Trailhead. At 38, she had spent the better part of a decade pioneering alternative therapy methods for trauma survivors, but this week would be her most ambitious project yet. 5 carefully selected participants would join her for 7 days of what she called immersive wilderness therapy, a complete break from civilization designed to strip away the barriers that traditional counseling couldn't reach. Dr. Chen checked her watch. 9:15 a.m., July 14, 2023. Her participants would arrive within the hour, each carrying their own invisible wounds in a backpack full of survival gear. She had spent months preparing for this retreat, studying each case file, understanding each person's specific trauma, and crafting what she believed would be a breakthrough therapeutic experience. But what happened at that campsite wasn't random. The 5 people who disappeared had more in common than just trauma. They shared a connection that went back years to another wilderness experience that was supposed to stay buried forever. The first to arrive was Marcus Webb, 26, a former Army medic whose hands still trembled when he heard unexpected sounds. His military records showed a spotless service history, until an IED explosion in Afghanistan claimed 3 of his unit members. He'd been struggling with survivor's guilt for 2 years, unable to understand why he'd walked away when others hadn't. Rachel Torres pulled up 10 minutes later in a dented Honda Civic, her dark hair covering half her face in a way that seemed deliberate. At 24, she was the youngest of the group, referred to Dr. Chen after a series of panic attacks that had cost her a promising career in journalism. Her trauma stemmed from witnessing a mass shooting at a music festival 3 years earlier, an event that had left her unable to be in crowds without experiencing debilitating anxiety. Jamie Parker arrived exactly on time, as Dr. Chen had expected. The 31-year-old software engineer approached everything with methodical precision, a coping mechanism developed after surviving a house fire that killed his younger sister when he was 16. Jamie's guilt wasn't about what he'd done. It was about what he hadn't done fast enough. Lisa Morrison's arrival was announced by the sound of motorcycle engines echoing through the valley. The 29-year-old EMT had ridden her Harley from Denver, preferring the open road to enclosed spaces. Her trauma was more recent. 6 months earlier, she'd been first on the scene of a school bus accident where her own nephew was among the casualties she couldn't save. The last to join the group was David Kim, 27, who hiked the final 2 miles to the meeting point rather than drive. A former wilderness guide, he knew these mountains better than anyone, but he'd stopped leading groups after a hiking accident claimed the life of a client under his supervision. The lawsuit had been dismissed, but David's guilt remained. Dr. Chen gathered the group in a circle among the towering pines. "Before we begin," she said, pulling out a metal lockbox, "I need everyone to surrender their phones, smartwatches, and any other electronic devices. This week is about disconnecting from the digital world and reconnecting with yourselves and each other." One by one, the participants placed their devices in the box. Dr. Chen locked it with a small key that she tucked into her hiking boot. "The only communication device we'll have is my satellite phone, and that's strictly for emergencies." What Dr. Chen didn't tell them was that she'd also brought something else, a hidden digital recorder, voice-activated, designed to capture the group's interactions for later analysis. She'd used similar devices in previous sessions, always with full disclosure and consent. But this time, she wanted to observe their natural dynamics without the self-consciousness that came with knowing they were being recorded. The first 3 days unfolded exactly as Dr. Chen had hoped. The group established camp at a secluded site 15 miles from the nearest trail, accessible only by a grueling hike through dense forest. They learned to work together. Marcus and David handled the heavier physical tasks, while Rachel and Jamie organized supplies and equipment. Lisa, with her medical training, became the group's unofficial safety coordinator. The therapy sessions began simply. Morning circles where each person shared a single word describing their emotional state. afternoon trust exercises that forced them to rely on each other, evening reflections written in journals that Dr. Chen reviewed each night by flashlight. By day 4, something had shifted. The journals that had started with tentative guarded entries became longer, more detailed, more personal. Marcus wrote about the faces of his fallen comrades that visited him in dreams. Rachel described the sound of gunshots that echoed in her mind whenever she closed her eyes. Jamie documented his recurring nightmares about smoke and flames and a sister's voice calling for help. But it was Lisa's entry from day 4 that would later send chills through investigators. We've been talking after Dr. Chen goes to sleep. All of us have something in common that she doesn't know about, something from before our individual traumas. David remembers first. We think the others are starting to remember too. Dr. Chen noticed the change in group dynamics on day 5. The participants had formed a tight bond that seemed to exclude her. They shared private jokes, communicated with glances, and often fell silent when she approached. During the morning session, she decided to address it directly. "I've noticed you've all become very close very quickly," she said, studying their faces. "That's wonderful, but I'm curious about what you're not sharing with me." The group exchanged looks. Finally, David spoke. "We've been talking about our experiences before our main traumas, childhood stuff, family dynamics, and we've realized we have more in common than we thought." Dr. Chen nodded encouragingly. "Would you like to share those connections with me?" "Not yet," Rachel said quietly. "We're still processing." That evening, Dr. Chen reviewed her hidden recordings from the previous nights. What she heard made her question everything she thought she knew about her carefully selected group. The recordings revealed late-night conversations that painted a very different picture. These 5 people hadn't been randomly brought together by trauma. They'd known each other before. Not well, and not recently, but they'd crossed paths at a summer camp in Colorado 15 years earlier. The same summer camp where a counselor named Thomas Brennan had been accused of inappropriate behavior with several campers before disappearing into the wilderness, never to be found. Marcus's voice on the recording was clear. "I was 11. You were all there too. Cabin 7 and 8, the older kids group. Brennan was our wilderness instructor." Rachel's response chilled Dr. Chen. "He didn't just disappear. We made sure he couldn't hurt anyone else." The recording continued with fragments of memory, shared recollections of a night 15 years ago when 5 traumatized children had followed their abuser into the woods and decided to take matters into their own hands. They'd been too young to fully understand what they'd done, and in the years that followed, they'd suppressed the memories, moved on with their lives, developed the individual traumas that had eventually brought them to Dr. Chen's attention. But being together again, in a similar wilderness setting, had triggered something they couldn't control. The memories were returning, and with them, the bond they'd formed that night when they'd buried more than just a body in the Colorado mountains. Dr. Chen sat in her tent, staring at the recorder in her hands. Her experimental therapy had worked too well. She'd brought together 5 people who shared a secret that went far deeper than individual trauma. They shared a collective guilt that had shaped their entire adult lives. She made a decision that would prove to be her last. Instead of ending the retreat early, instead of confronting them with what she'd learned, Dr. Chen decided to help them process this buried memory therapeutically. She believed she could guide them through it, help them heal from the childhood trauma that had led to their deadly encounter with Brennan. Day 6's morning session was different. Dr. Chen told the group she wanted to explore their deepest, most buried memories. She led them through a guided meditation designed to access suppressed experiences. One by one, the memories surfaced completely. Marcus remembered holding the flashlight while the others dug. Rachel remembered how quiet Brennan had become after David hit him with the rock. Jamie remembered the methodical way they'd planned it, even as children understanding that some secrets had to be kept forever. Lisa remembered checking for a pulse and finding none. David remembered choosing the location where the body would never be found. "You were children," Dr. Chen said softly when they finished sharing. "What happened to you was abuse. What you did in response was a traumatized reaction to years of manipulation and harm. You survived. But instead of relief, Doctor." Chen saw something else in their faces, a hardness that hadn't been there before, a cold calculation that made her blood run cold. "You know we can't let you leave with this information," David said quietly. Dr. Chen tried to maintain her professional composure. "Patient confidentiality means you recorded us," Rachel interrupted, pointing to the small device in Dr. Chen's hands. "Without our consent, that changes things." Lisa stood up slowly. "We've lived with this secret for 15 years. We've built lives, careers, relationships. We can't let that disappear because of a therapy experiment." Marcus shook his head sadly. "You chose the wrong group, Doctor Chen. You wanted to heal us, but some wounds are meant to stay buried." Jamie's voice was emotionless. "We've been planning this since day 4, since we remembered. We knew you'd figure it out eventually." Dr. Chen backed toward her tent, her hand reaching for the satellite phone, but David was faster. He'd already found it and removed the batteries. "We're not going to hurt you," David said, though his words carried no comfort. "But we can't let you destroy 5 lives to satisfy your academic curiosity." The last entry in Dr. Chen's journal, found months later by investigators, was written in increasingly shaky handwriting. "They're not the traumatized patients I thought they were. They're a functioning unit that's been protecting each other for 15 years. The therapy didn't break down their barriers. It reminded them why those barriers existed. I think I understand now. Some people come to the wilderness to find themselves. Others come to lose the people who threaten to expose what they found. I should have left yesterday. I should have..." The entry ended mid-sentence. When the group failed to return from their retreat, it took search and rescue teams 4 days to locate their campsite. They found the tents neatly arranged, equipment properly stored, and a carefully banked fire that had been tended recently. Dr. Chen's therapy journals were stacked in order, documenting a seemingly successful group bonding experience. Her hidden recorder was found, but the memory card had been removed. The participants' personal belongings were gone, along with their individual backpacks and hiking gear. It appeared they had packed up and left voluntarily, but investigators couldn't understand why they would abandon their vehicles at the trailhead. The official search lasted 6 weeks. Helicopters, tracking dogs, and volunteer search parties combed hundreds of square miles of wilderness. They found no trace of the 6 missing people. The case was eventually classified as a voluntary disappearance, though investigators privately suspected something more sinister had occurred. It was Dr. Chen's research assistant who provided the breakthrough investigators needed. Going through Dr. Chen's computer files, she discovered the detailed background research on each participant, including sealed juvenile records that Dr. Chen had somehow accessed. The connection to the 1998 summer camp incident led investigators to reopen a 15-year-old missing person case. Thomas Brennan's remains were discovered in October 2023, buried deep in a section of forest that had been clear-cut for development. Dental records confirmed his identity. The autopsy revealed blunt force trauma to the skull, consistent with being struck by a large rock. Evidence suggested he'd been buried shortly after death, sometime in the summer of 1998. But finding Brennan's body didn't solve the mystery of the 6 missing people. If anything, it deepened it. Investigators now understood why Dr. Chen's therapy group had vanished, but they still had no idea where they'd gone. The answer came from an unexpected source: a security camera at a remote gas station near the Wyoming border. Footage from July 20th, 2023, 6 days after the group was supposed to return, showed 5 people purchasing supplies and fuel. The image quality was poor, but facial recognition software identified them as Marcus Webb, Rachel Torres, Jamie Parker, Lisa Morrison, and David Kim. Dr. Sarah Chen was not with them. Further investigation revealed a pattern of credit card usage and ATM withdrawals, suggesting the group had traveled north into Canada. The trail went cold at the border, where cash transactions replaced digital footprints. 2 years later, the case remains officially open, but effectively cold. The families of the 5 missing participants maintain that their loved ones are victims, not perpetrators. Dr. Chen's family continues to demand answers about her disappearance. Federal investigators believe the group is still together, living under assumed identities somewhere in the Canadian wilderness. But there are those who believe the truth is darker. Former FBI profiler Janet Morrison, no relation to Lisa Morrison, studied the case extensively for her book, Collective Guilt, when childhood trauma creates adult predators. Her theory suggests that the 5 participants didn't just disappear, they evolved. These weren't random trauma survivors, Morrison writes. They were a coordinated unit that had been protecting their secret for 15 years. Dr. Chen's therapy didn't heal them, it activated them. They realized they could continue to protect each other, but only if they eliminated threats to their collective security. Morrison believes Dr. Chen was killed on day 6 of the retreat, and that her body is buried somewhere in the Colorado wilderness where it will never be found. She theorizes that the group had been planning their disappearance for years, maintaining minimal contact with each other, but always prepared to activate their collective survival plan if their secret was threatened. The most chilling evidence supporting Morrison's theory came from a park ranger's report filed 3 months after the disappearance. While conducting a routine patrol, the ranger discovered an illegal campsite that had been recently abandoned. Among the debris was a partially burned notebook containing what appeared to be therapy exercises and personal reflections. The handwriting matched samples from Dr. Chen's previous research notes. One legible passage saved from the flames read, "Day 43 since the retreat. The group continues to function as a unit. They've adapted to wilderness living with remarkable efficiency." David's knowledge of the terrain combined with Lisa's medical skills and Marcus's tactical training makes them nearly self-sufficient. Rachel documents everything, while Jamie has developed communication protocols for avoiding detection. They've created a new kind of family, one bound by shared guilt and mutual protection. I understand now that my role has changed from therapist to chronicler. I'm recording their evolution for whoever finds this notebook. They've become something beyond trauma survivors. They've become something beyond human. The entry ended there, the rest consumed by fire. The notebook was tested for DNA evidence. Blood traces found on the paper matched Dr. Chen's genetic profile from medical records. The implications were clear. Dr. Chen had survived the initial confrontation at the campsite, but had been held captive by the group for over 6 weeks before her final fate was sealed. As of 2025, the case of the Adventure Therapy Group remains one of the most disturbing missing person cases in Colorado history. 5 people who came to the wilderness to heal from trauma instead disappeared into it, taking their therapist with them. Whether they're living peacefully in isolation or continuing a pattern of violence against anyone who threatens their secret remains unknown. The abandoned campsite has been sealed off by Park Services, but hikers occasionally report finding strange evidence of habitation, carefully concealed fire pits, food caches, and carved markings on trees that suggest ongoing human presence in the area. Dr. Chen's experimental therapy program was discontinued following her disappearance. Her research notes, however, continue to be studied by criminal psychologists, interested in how childhood trauma can create adult sociopathy when combined with group dynamics and shared guilt. The case serves as a chilling reminder that some people go to the wilderness to find themselves, and some find things that were better left buried. The Adventure Therapy Group discovered that healing isn't always about facing the past. Sometimes it's about making sure the past stays buried, no matter who gets buried with it. In her final case notes, found on her office computer and dated the day before the retreat began, Dr. Chen wrote, "I believe this group has the potential for breakthrough healing. Their individual traumas mask a deeper connection that, once addressed therapeutically, could lead to remarkable recovery. I'm optimistic about the week ahead. She was right about the connection being deeper than individual trauma. She was wrong about everything else. The wilderness keeps its secrets, and some of those secrets have learned to keep the wilderness.